Without further ado, I introduce to you Brett Friel of Technology Advisors.
Thanks, Alex. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Just a quick fun fact before we get going. I think it's Alex's birthday, our organizer's birthday, so happy birthday, Alex. Nothing like wishing a happy birthday in a public webinar. So anyway, with that out of the way, again, thanks for joining us, and we'll give you an overview of change management as we see it at Technology Advisors. And you're all most likely here because you've deployed CRM or are probably thinking about it, I imagine, and you probably want to see some success with it. So as you probably all know, if you've done your research and everything, it can be an extremely useful tool for your organization, but it's not something that you can just slam in and expect to work the next day. I'm sure most of you probably know that at this point, but it takes planning from several different aspects. And by that I mean just more than a training plan for your users, and that's certainly part of it, of course, but there's a lot more to it than that to take into consideration, and that's where change management comes in. Before we get started, I think I recognize a few names on the list, but if I could just have Alex throw a quick poll question out there. I just want to see where you're at with regards to your implementation or your consideration of implementing. And I think you should all see that on your screen at this point. So if you all could just take a second and vote. And Alex, when you see like a decent amount of responses, you can go ahead and just flash that back to show some results, perhaps. I'll give you just a few more seconds. All right, so we have, looks like quite a few have already implemented, and several are still in the planning phases. Okay, that's a pretty good mix. Thanks for doing that. That'll help us out here with regards to our presentation. Excellent. So I'll go back to showing my screen here now that we got those results. All right, before I kind of move forward, what is change management, right? If you look it up, it's basically a set of processes that are used to ensure that if you implement any changes, they're done in an orderly, controlled, and systematic fashion. Now that seems pretty vague and also kind of straightforward, right? Well, something that's not so straightforward is, of course, the human interaction and effect on all of that. So one of the main goals of change management has to do with the human aspects of overcoming any resistance to this change so that your end users will end up buying into the change, in this case CRM, and achieve the organization's goals in both an orderly and an effective manner. And so it's not all chaos before that actually your goals are achieved. It's all done fairly smoothly. So this is an issue that a lot of organizations face in any sort of technology-related implementation. It certainly happens a lot with CRM implementations, and there's good reason for that. I mean, salespeople have their methods of hitting and exceeding their quotas, right? And any deviation from that will slow them down. So you kind of understand why they'd be concerned or not completely receptive to some changes in regards to CRM. But I mean, that's definitely one challenge. There's some other ones that change management will help us address as well. So let's take a closer look at some of those challenges here. So we're looking at here the bar graph. It's from Gartner, which is perhaps the most well-respected IT research and advisory firm around. It's a little old. It's 2006. But the same concerns from then definitely applied to the now, if perhaps not more, as more and more organizations are realizing a need for CRM and are adopting it. So at the time of this poll, when implementing CRM, the top 3 challenges enterprise faced were coordination across departments, integration with internal applications and processes, and buy-in or participation from internal staff. So if we look at other studies, the top challenge was identified as obtaining management buy-in. So 2 out of the 3 top challenges here focus on internal coordination and buy-in, and then management buy-in is within the top 10 as well. So basically what we're seeing is that organizations are concerned with organization-wide coordination and participation from their staff. These are the actual people that are going to be using technology and using CRM on a daily basis to ensure their ongoing success. If you look at this, I mean, quantifying benefits, return on investment, they're definitely there, and they're a good consideration, definitely a good concern, but they've taken a back seat because organizations are realizing that you can't just slam CRM in and you can't get good return on investment without having your users adopt it and use it regularly to view those benefits. So what does this mean to you? Basically, if you're implementing or have implemented, ensure that change management and some organizational collaboration are part of your CRM program from day one. And for those of you who have already implemented, those of you who took the poll, it's not too late to start. Take a renewed interest in your CRM package, and you can take into account the considerations that we'll talk about here, maybe in another phase of your CRM implementation, or maybe just kind of a renewal of the fact that you want your users to use CRM. So some of the things we're going to talk about initially here, why do these CRM implementations fail? I'm going to give you some background on the strategy and structure needed in the CRM change management program. And also we'll talk to some tactical elements that should be included for a good CRM change management program. So I'll address all these from kind of a higher level today because, of course, every organization is different. And to get into the weeds as far as the organization and the users and taking into account all those things, that, there's a little more in depth than that, but we can give you a good high-level understanding of what to consider here. So let's start with why CRM implementations fail and give you some background there. Just real quickly here, as you can see, 3 main points, right? As far as the end users, just underestimating the magnitude of the change and the effect it's going to have on those users. As an organization, we're not proving the imperative, right, the reasoning of why we're using CRM and proving that to your users. And then just from a leadership level, just not having a good, effective executive sponsorship, someone who really wants this to work and succeed. Because, of course, if you don't have that and you give users the option, they're going to probably opt out of using CRM, right? So when looking into this, it's really important for you to understand your organizational characteristics conducive to change, the dynamics of the change process with regards to your users, the role of your own company culture. Going along with all that, just to have a general understanding of leadership and communication and affecting results, and as well as the collective behavioral patterns of users in any sort of change. And we'll get into that a little bit more here too. So the combination of these issues, and it gives any sort of change initiative its complexity. And then, of course, on the flip side, the ability to manage them determines your organization's adaptability. So, and going beyond this a little bit, when you start taking into account, other projects beyond CRM, as we're discussing here, that require changes to your organization, just the number of those change initiatives and the speed at which you're pushing them through, and the amount of adjustment it takes for your users can really start to take its toll on individuals and their ability to respond to these initiatives. So, just something to be aware of, just kind of rationing out these changes for your users and not overwhelming them with all sorts of different change, right? So continuing on with this, talking about the magnitude of CRM in general, it's often underestimated because a lot of times, and this is changing a little bit as we move forward, but a lot of times it's regarded as a technology change initiative that's driven by IT, right? And that couldn't be really further from the truth. CRM definitely has its technical components and everything, but its success depends largely on social factors and your organization. It's all about your organization and the people using the system. So the chart, as you see here, just to give you a little idea of where CRM fits in, you can probably tell by the big yellow star there. But the change, the chart here represents 3 different levels of change, and actually there's a 4th one too. But the first order changes are the changes that only affect tasks. So you implement technology, it affects tasks. A good example of that would be some automated report distribution. If you move to the second order change, it's not just the task, but you start looking at the people and the roles of those people performing the changes that happen. So an example of that would be Salesforce automation, which CRM absolutely does as well. You get into the third order changes, and that's where you actually start affecting the structure and the fabric of your organization. You get changes to organizational hierarchies or communication channels or some workflow patterns that are altered as a result of this implementation. That's a third order change. And then you can build on top of that. The fourth order change might be customer portal or something that involves something outside of your organization. So CRM is really a good example of that third or fourth level change. So again, as far as planning and what does that mean to you, especially those of you that are implementing, because I'm sure that most of you that have implemented have kind of found this out either the easy way or the hard way, but an organization thinking about CRM and looking to be successful with it should approach it with, in the context of that third or fourth order change. If you approach it in any other way, you probably underestimate the impact of CRM and also the time and cost associated with it. All right, so earlier when we said prove the imperative, what do we mean by that? Basically, to prove the imperative, your organization needs to show the benefits of engaging those user groups and providing empathy to them. There are definitely different rates of adoption and needs for technology and process change in an organization. You need to be sensitive to that and make sure the users actually get something out of it, right? So, what can you do about it? First of all, we'll get into kind of communication plans and things like that, but create communication and change management plans that are personally appealing to early adopters, reluctant majority, and resistant laggard users, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But instead of just doing a blanket message to everyone in your organization, I mean, we really have to become familiar with the fact that there are different behavior patterns, and we want to approach them a little bit differently. If you show empathy for stakeholders and their specific needs and their pain points that they're experiencing day to day, it's going to result in more tailor-made strategies for why that change is important to them, how useful and beneficial it will be to them, and why the cost of actually not adopting the change are not in their best interest. So we're talking more about the carrot and stick approach, and of course there needs to be some of the stick here too, not just the carrots, and that's where the committed, capable leader comes in. Someone that can show empathy and realize that users need certain things and want to be a part of this, but also to kind of drive and make this work. And that person will understand that users don't always adopt the way you think they will, or the same way. They're not all the same person, basically. So that's where a committed, capable leader comes into play, when that can kind of walk that fine line. All right, this is a pretty simple graphic, just showing on a real high level how we kind of approach change management at Technology Advisors. We don't have our full standard implementation, from start to or from scratch shown here, but this change management plan works right along the scope of a brand new implementation, and it also works as a standalone effort for an organization that wants to show renewed interest in CRM. And of course, this falls right along with we got project management in there and some exclamation points, not hazard signs, for approval along the way. But basically, we have assessment, strategy development. So assessment, we're assessing our organization and the users that are going to be using CRM, and getting a good idea of where it all fits together, what they're looking for, and creating some communication plans based on that. How are we going to take their input, relay it, and get them excited about CRM and figure out where your organization fits into all that. So that's the strategy development, and then of course execution and communication. That's where we actually go through those communication plans and start giving feedback. And we'll talk about the communication plans in a little bit, but that's basically throughout the course of the project while CRM is being developed, or while we're rolling out the next phase in your CRM implementation. At the very end, of course, is the education, and then ongoing education, and that helps with the user adoption. So we'll talk a little bit more about how this all fits together a little bit later. Let's talk about that first, assessment and strategy development. So if we've seen anything so far, we need to address change management from both the organizational perspective as well as the individual level. So organization, of course, drives the path to how you'll use CRM in terms of the overall process. But again, it comes down to the abilities of the users and the position of the users to really make all this work. So they need to be catered to as well. So from the organization, we'll talk a little bit about culture here and how we assess the culture, and then talk about how you're going to use CRM, and then breaking it down to the individual level. Just determining their behavioral position. Do they fit into that reluctant majority, or are they resistant laggard type of person? Any organizational interdependencies that we should be aware of, and then general things like computer proficiency. All these things are going to have their role in determining how good they are at adapting to CRM and adapting to that change. So, and then the statement there: determine the gap between where the organization is and where it needs to be to roll out something like CRM or, in fact, any other technology. So let's talk a little bit about organizational culture. So the first thing is, don't always blame IT. I mean, roughly about 20% of project failures are linked to technical problems. That number pretty much suggests that project leadership, the project team, is well positioned to make cultural barriers to the implementation of CRM are one of the actual leading causes of program failure, and it can cause it to fail even if the project was delivered on time and everything seemingly fell into place. And that's just because much of the CRM program, its success depends on the ability of an organization to continually support CRM once it's been implemented. It's an ongoing process. It doesn't just stop once we give access to the URL that they'll go to access CRM or install the software. We need to keep that nurtured and keep it going. So what you might find, though, is it's tough to even get going because of these cultural barriers that exist between the business leadership and staff, IT leadership and staff. So understanding the key preferences from a cultural perspective can help your CRM teams, CRM strategists, and executives better understand how to align the scope and the objectives of your implementation accordingly for each group. So what we see here are the 4 cultural models that we'll kind of generalize that: the business champion, the collaborative transformers, lockdown, and the IT champion. So the differences between these 4 models, they're marked by the level of partnering there from low to high. So the higher the level of partnering, the better between the departments in your organization. And then the adoption of change from low to high, there just shows how receptible people are to adopting change in a particular organization. So part of this is just an assessment of the organizational culture, and ideally you'd be in the collaborative transformers where everyone is working towards change and is adapting to it, and IT wants to help out with that. But that's not always the case, right? Being a realist here. But anyway, the key point here is understanding where your organization is relative to this framework that you see here, and then based on that, focus on where the level of partnering needs to be increased maybe, and use that accordingly against the relative challenges to adopting change. So if we have a good understanding of this, kind of helps us with where we can focus our attention. As far as the individual users go, based on our assessments, and those assessments might be things like surveys or interviews of users or the project managers or department managers. So what we see here is a nice bell-shaped curve. And within any group, you take individual responses to some sort of change or stimulus. They're going to follow some sort of bell-shaped curve most likely. So as we look at this, we have a small percentage of those individuals that are early adopters. The majority of people in the middle there, the bell, will be less enthusiastic, but over time will start to accept the change. And at the very end, of course, we've got our resistant laggards, which I think most of you are probably familiar with. The people that just will resist change and just don't want to adapt to any sort of instituted change. So you can see here the chasm, and there's the tipping point. Ideally we want to get over that tipping point, so the early adopters are exciting the reluctant majority, and they're saying this is great, and getting them on board, and then you get over that hump where people are starting to use it, and it all kind of snowballs downhill. Looking at that bell curve, you can begin to understand that adoption distribution can stall if those early adopters fail to capture the attention of that reluctant majority, and that's where that chasm comes into play. So capturing that attention of that reluctant majority is more difficult than it might seem, because those early adopters there, they might be visionaries, they might see how this is going to help them, but they're not very good at orchestrating and leading that change. So, and that's where a lot more of this change management comes in with the the committed, capable leader, right? And just identifying with that reluctant majority to get as many of them on board as possible, and kind of solving some of their needs. So, your action item here would be to just know where the key stakeholders are on this adoption curve, and just understanding how to appeal to their expected responses, basically. And from there, we can better plan our communications with them and our training also with these different groups of users. All right, so putting everything in perspective so far, some things you want to consider in terms of change management with CRM are, just understanding the reasoning behind why you're using CRM for the organization, and be sure that you're driving it to be a customer-centric plan. And we'll talk a little bit more about customer-centric focus a little bit later. But also understand who's driving CRM at your organization, and also understand the dynamics of those areas that need to use CRM, and ensure that those departments needing to use it are cooperative with each other. If we break it down even further, of course, understanding the groups of actual users who will be accessing CRM on a day-to-day basis, and definitely take into consideration their needs, and based on that, develop communication plans tailored to each group. So to develop a communication plan for each constituency, you have to have dialogue with them, right, and find out what their main points that you need to pay particular attention to are. And that's where the assessment comes in, and we kind of mentioned that, that beginning assessment phase where if you focus on just, interviews, surveys, whatever you can do to kind of get some feedback from users and get their ideas on CRM and figure out, what they're worried about and how we can make their lives easier. And from there, you can target your communications and develop this communication plan. And, what is a communication plan? All it really is what it sounds like, a series of events and a strategy to get in touch with your users, right? This could be done any number of ways, through webinars, lunch and learns, demos, just meetings to get their feedback, right? Announcements from an executive sponsor. There's many different forms of planned communications, but just kind of creating that plan and then following through on it based on what we know about each particular group of users in the organization in general. So if we look at some sample groups, we'll see specific challenges we might come across in our assessments, and we'll work on planning on how we will use the system to ensure that we answer some of these pain points and these challenges. So you're really asking, what will CRM help each constituency with? And based on that, this kind of doubles into our actual project itself. Is it going to be out-of-the-box CRM? Does it need to be customized to fit some of these needs? Is some of it going to be a phase 2 part of this, that we're saying, yes, we understand your concern, but we want to get this rolled out, and we'll take that into consideration for a phase 2. So what we're really trying to do is show these groups what's in it for them, and incorporate opportunities to bring up these issues through the communication plan, the webinars, lunch and learns, etc. And provide answers really in the application, building it into the application, and maybe in some cases it's already built into CRM as an out-of-the-box feature, and also in the communication plans, we said. So if we take a look at this, we've got just, again, a sample: change management challenges, executives, political infighting, the lack of sponsorship, not understanding or underestimating the magnitude of change, and we can see what some of those sample deliverables might be for each type of group of users. We continue on here to the next slide. We can't forget about the end users here in a common complaint, right? This is just auditing our actions. Big Brother is watching me. We know our process is best. Why do we need to put it into a CRM system? And what we'll take a look at is different ways to get them excited about this, like incentives and reward plan. And we'll talk about training schedules and things like that. So that's part of all of this, is taking these things into consideration. So really, we need to look at getting our end users on board with the ultimate goal of driving customer satisfaction, right, and benefiting the company. So that's where some of these incentives and things like that come in. A good change management plan can help you look at providing some consistency in tying CRM information to customer satisfaction. And that's often information that's difficult to get reliably and consistently, right? Explaining this reasoning to your employees and getting them to realize that CRM can help them do this more effectively is definitely part of the plan. And of course, compensation on any level as a result of increased customer satisfaction is definitely going to keep your or help your employees see the benefit even more, probably in the best sort of way. The trouble is that's kind of tough to quantify, right? So, where you can start with all this is just getting them to use the system with the knowledge that the more info on customers that you have, the better that you can actually satisfy those customers. So, that's where we can get into actually just watching how they're using the system, and hopefully they're adding in more data, right? And we'll take a look at some ways to kind of just quantify that on a very simple level. But by getting to that point, it'll create more customer-focused team, of course, happier customers as a result of all that, and a more effective CRM system, which will benefit the company. So, take into consideration the fact that, again, as we started out talking about, it's all about the users actually using the system, and we might need to provide some incentives along with that. And that's not something you see all the time with CRM, basing some of your incentives around the use of a CRM system. It's usually based on sales and things like that. Well, there might be some cause for giving them incentives to just simply using CRM. And some of the things that we can track with the CRM system are, just basically increasing trends on pieces that can be pretty much easily monitored. So as we take a look at this, number of activities completed, that's a pretty common one, and we've got time frames associated here, but what are the number of phone calls you're making and completing in history in CRM? How many opportunities were opened in the last, 30, 60, 90 days? And of course, not all of these will apply, tickets and things like that. Not everyone uses tickets in CRM, but there's certainly the customer service side of that you can track tickets. Number of new accounts and contact records modified, it's a little less likely, but basically collecting new information and updating existing records and things like that. Those are ways that we can see that they're actually using the CRM system, and we got to believe if they're a good sales rep, right, that if they're using the system, that means they're in contact with the customers. If they're in contact with the customers, they're hopefully making the customer happy, right? So if we take that a little bit further, as far as measuring organizational success, increased sales effectiveness, dollar deals closed 1 year prior to a CRM versus, this year after you've been using CRM for a year. Hopefully you can see a difference in that, and as well as, a decreased trend in the time it takes to close out opportunities and increased opportunity win ratio, of course. These are some factors. There are other factors that can have their effect on this also, like the economy, for instance, that you need to consider. But hopefully, as you start using CRM, you can really start to track trends and establish a baseline here that you can measure off of, something a little bit more quantifiable than having everything in spreadsheets and things like that. So, basically this should be part of your strategy as well, is just keeping this in mind in your change management program that, all right, if we're going to do something like this, let's do it all the way and measure our success, or have some sort of idea of what those quantifiable measures could be to show that people are actually using the system, our users are adopting it, and hopefully, again, this is resulting in happier customers. And you can find that out by doing, customer satisfaction polls and things like that as an add-on to all of this. All right, something near and dear to my heart, just doing a lot of the training at Technology Advisors. You can't forget the training as a result of all this, or in conjunction with change management, and the importance it has with continuing to drive user adoption after the fact, right? On the first side, it's good to have people who understand the technical side of your system, sort of administrative users or power users. Some of their duties might be updating pick lists or adding new fields, right, or managing some of the other lists that you have in there, and users and things like that, security. If those things weren't done, and the system doesn't fit with reality, it's going to be difficult to keep people interested in using it, keep your other end users interested in using it if they can't get a pick list value added, or at least discuss that addition of something like that. So it needs to be attended to. That's something to take into consideration in an implementation. And then, of course, a good plan needs to be in place for getting your actual users up to speed, right? And it's important after they're up to speed to have resources available for them to learn more as they dig in, because everybody's going to develop more questions after they get their first exposure or go through that initial training. And also have an outlet to voice concerns or voice issues that come up, right? We can't just leave them in the dark with CRM after we've rolled it out to them. So, and taking this a step further, if I go back a little bit here to the end users, right? The breakdown of deliverables and things like that. One of them is an application training schedule. We start to break that out a little bit more. We want to actually, again, consider addressing the concerns of each constituency or each of the user behavioral groups, the early adopters, reluctant majority, and the resistant laggards. And take that into consideration that they all learn a little bit differently based on some of those assessments we did, and some of them maybe have not so good computer proficiency. We might need to put them in a separate session to learn a little bit slower, at a slower pace. So if you throw them all in a room at the same time, people are going to be at different levels, and the people that are learning fast are going to get frustrated that they're being held back, and the people that are a little bit slower are going to get frustrated that they can't keep up. So if we do something like that, we'll be in a better position to make sure all of your user concerns are understood and everyone's coming up to speed at roughly the same speed. All right, so some recommendations here. Don't take the impact of CRM for granted. Prove it through the context of a change management plan and think this all out before you implement, or if you have implemented and are continuing on to another phase, or just showing some renewed interest in CRM. Give it some thought as to how can we get people excited, and what are the things that we could do to get users to adopt it perhaps better than they have. So finding the right sponsorship is really important, really, really important. Any change management plan or any CRM implementation is going to be very hard to do successfully without that. We need someone that's going to really drive users to use it, but also, again, be empathetic to the needs of the users as well. So, again, if you give people the option, you just throw CRM out there saying you can use it if you want. The early adopter people, the ones that you identify as early adopters, might pick up on it, but most people just kind of wipe their hands of it and just let it go, right? And continue doing things the way that they have been doing. So use change magnitudes in your assessments to figure out what kind of constituencies, the user's potential changes, challenges, and the deliverables you'll need to prepare for. So we come up with our list of deliverables, and those could be, again, customizations in the application, communication plans, and that's all based on the challenges and the issues that come up as a result of assessments and things like that with your users. Assess your present readiness for CRM. Do you have a lot of change initiatives going on? Are there other pieces of software being rolled out in your organization? Just figure out if you're actually ready for it or not. And are your users going to be receptive to it? If they're worn out because you've just implemented, new HR system and new ERP system and some other things, then it's tough for them to get excited about adopting a CRM system as well, especially something that they're all going to be really involved with. And continuing to grow beyond your go live, so beyond that initial training where we're rolling it out to users, plan for training down the road, some sessions, just webinars and things like that, where maybe you didn't roll out the mail merge functionality when you first went live because it would just been more information for them to take into consideration. But maybe once they get up to speed with opportunities and using their activities and things like that, that we start to plan for we'll do a 2-hour webinar for those people that are interested 1 month down the road, and we'll teach you how to use mail merge in that webinar and roll out those additional pieces of functionality, as well as maybe train on some of the original pieces of CRM that you rolled out with your go live. So just kind of cultivating that plan to keep people interested in CRM and gradually show them more functionality in it. And also, the last thing, ensure the 3 steps for a change management framework are part of your CRM planning and strategy. And of course, those 3 stages are the ones that we talked about earlier, the assessment and strategy development, where we assess the organization, where we sit as far as, just the people working together, departments working together, and just the general level of adoption for new software in our organization. And then, of course, the individual assessments, interviews, and things like that, so we can kind of get a better idea of our user base. And then based on all that, still in that assessment and strategy development, developing communication plans for how we interact with each one of the constituencies based on CRM and what we're trying to roll out. And you can see how execution communication, the communication plan, is basically being rolled out as we're going through our development life cycle. So we're doing the customizations and getting CRM configured, set up in your system. And at the very end of it, we're doing the education and user adoption. And you can see how this fits in, again, to our overall implementation plan at Technology Advisors. But again, it doesn't have to. It's something we could easily do as a standalone sort of initiative, and something you could do internally as well, bits and pieces of this change management plan. I'm putting my own information up here. I know that we're about 20 minutes or so early. Be happy to maybe just take a few questions. Just keep in mind that, if you'd like to talk in more detail about this, whether you use our services or you just want to get some more background on change management and some specifics or get some ideas, feel free to drop me a line. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. But if you have some general questions right now, we could probably take a few at this point. But that's about what I have for you. And again, if you have any questions or anything like that specifically, I'd be happy to talk about any concerns you all have for those of you that are tuned into the webinar here.
Hey, Brett, there was one question asked. It was if they will be able to get the slide presentations after we're done.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that. I'm not sure what our policy is on the webinars, but you have you don't have to say the name, but you have the name of the person, Alex, that I could could drop them a line. Okay. Obviously, right. Yeah, I'll follow up on that just to make sure that I can pass it along. We'll let you know either way.
All right. If there are any questions, raise your hand or type it into the chat box, and we can respond to it.
Give you just a few minutes here. Otherwise, thanks for tuning in, everyone. Also, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day, and hopefully you've got some ideas from this presentation or just have a better understanding of what change management encompasses. And again, if you want to talk a little bit more in detail about your implementation, we'd be happy to do that. So.
All right, it looks like there are no other questions. No one has said anything. So thank you for attending today's webinar. And we have 2 more in the future, one on cloud computing and another on improving your e-marketing techniques.
We hope to see you there. Thanks, everyone.
Yep.